Welcome to KimiB.Good, the podcast covering sustainability topics and good news. Today I would like to talk to you about the big picture. In terms of sustainability, climate change seems to me like the big picture because nearly every sustainable development goal is linked to climate change. These goals were set by the United Nations to transform our world towards a more sustainable development. This time I joined and interviewed innovative project leaders at the Climate Launchpad bootcamp and asked them about their project scope, their motivation and their learnings. I also moderated a roundtable at the 3rd Basel Sustainability Forum and asked experts and students to answer some of my questions concerning climate change. Let me briefly explain what the Climate Launchpad is first. The Climate Launchpad is the world's largest green business ideas competition. The mission is to unlock the world's clean tech potential that addresses climate change. The competition creates a stage for those ideas, and it is split into the submission part, the boot camp, which lasts 2 days, and the finals, where the participants pitch their projects to an interdisciplinary jury. So let's start with the participants, whom I interviewed on the 2nd day of the boot camp, where they work on their innovative and helpful projects very intensely to be prepared for the finals end of August this year. I hope you will enjoy the interviews.
So my name is Elena and I'm a student studying post-industrial design at the Hochschule für Gestaltung und Kunst in Basel. And we are a team of 3 people, and our project is called Nutrition. And what we basically do is we are collecting urine, or rather the nutrients from the urine, to use them or to recycle them as a fertilizer for plants. And our idea is to create a whole system from the collection of the urine to the filtration to the watering of the plants, and at the end to have the crop. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. How did you or your group came up with the idea to collect urine?
So basically, Moritz started to grow strawberries, and he wanted to have some really nice strawberries, and he tried out different ways of how to grow it, and he's really interested in biology. And what he first did is he tried out the aquaponics, which is using the excrements of fishes on a water hydroponic based system. So that the excrements of the fishes give the nutrients to the plants. And then he thought, okay, this is not really effective because like the excrements of fishes are really small. Why not just pee in there and see what happens? So he tried it out, and all of a sudden the strawberries went really big, and the plants were, the efficiency was much higher. So that's how we started it. And then because we are studying together, we had the same interests, and really fast we built up a team of 3 people.
That's a funny start of an idea to pee into strawberries, but yes, it worked. What's your the long time goal for your project? If you could wish something.
So, of course, one goal is to reduce the footprint by saving a lot of water by recycling the urine, especially because urine has raw materials that are really important for the environment and for the plants, and it would save a lot of energy by reusing them instead of getting them from other places. And one goal is, of course, to earn money with something I really like and I'm really into. And in a long term, it would be nice to start a business and to help people to grow their own vegetables with their own resources.
Mm-hmm. What's your motivation to participate in the Climate Launchpad program?
My motivation, I think the first one is to gain a lot of experience about how to start a startup, how does it work, and how can I have a positive impact on what surrounds me or on my environment. Yeah.
And would you say you like learned something so far?
Yes, a lot, because our problem was that we all like gardening, we all like to build things, we all like communication, and we all like to learn new things. For instance, how to create a website, how does it work? But what we didn't have was the whole business side. And I think within these 2 days we learned so much that is really helpful for us, and also really on the point. Like, we always had an output after 1 hour of coaching, which is really helpful.
Yeah. And really effective. What would you say is the biggest challenge so far for your whole project?
I think the biggest challenge is that we want to be a startup that is self-sustaining. We don't want other people to pay us to realize a project, because then it would mean that it's not that sustainable. And I think one problem we are facing is that urine is something people think it's disgusting. On the other side, if you think logically, to eat vegetables that are being fertilized with cow's shit is even more disgusting, especially if it's not filtered and it's full of hormones. I think that's a big problem. And also because we want to do something good, and it would be nice to earn money with it. But the question, how is it possible to make it into a business or to earn money with it is a hard question for us, so that we can still stand behind what we do.
Okay. What surprised you the most within these 2 days of the program?
Positive or negative?
Both. If you have positives or negatives, both okay.
Well, the one thing that comes to my mind is I think we had a wrong, or I personally had a wrong image on how much money we could earn with it. Mm-hmm. And I think we estimated ourselves not so well, because the price we would have wanted to sell our product is way too low. So that's something that really surprised me, but it was really good to see it.
Mm-hmm. And it's good that it's not the other way around, so that you not estimated it way too high, and you now have to lower it down. Yeah. So it's pretty good.
Yeah. So we wouldn't be in the minus, but we wouldn't earn a living with it either.
And do you have like one big learning or a takeaway message for other people who are currently starting a sustainable project?
Well, somebody told me it's really important that when you start a project like this, you really have to think about the business area, because that's something nobody really wants to do. But it's so important to talk about money, to talk about business, to think about if you could really earn something, especially for me, because I always like to do things for free. And I really have to learn to be, of course, to stay nice and polite, but also to be straightforward, or like let the jokes on the side and
get down to business.
Yes. Even if you don't like it, it's something you have to learn, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
We are a team of 3 people. One engineer who developed the concept, and then Jonathan, who is a finance guy. And I lived a lot in Africa, and I worked in Africa, and I saw the problems there. And we want to solve one of the big issues that happen in Africa. It's that a lot of people don't have access to electricity. And to do this, we developed an iron battery that works with the consumables. So every day people have to put consumables inside, and it creates electricity for one day.
Okay.
I'm Jonathan, the finance guy. I studied economics and finance, and I joined David, who's the CEO of the company now. Last year was a CTI Business Innovation training course, and that's how I met, and that's how we joined. And then Brack hopped on board, and now we are about 3 of us, and just 2 other people who work as advisors in the company.
That sounds pretty professional, actually, because you have like a finance guy and an engineer. Would you say it's a big advantage to have like interdisciplinary team?
So yes, definitely. I think we have quite a diverse team because, I mean, the CEO David has a background in. He's an engineer. Briak is also an engineer, but he has experience on the fields. He speaks Swahili fluently. I'm more of like a business finance guy, so I bring a bit of diversity as well. And the 2 other people are the lead scientists who developed the company. Sorry, not the company, the technology. And the other person is a professor at university now in the Netherlands, and she has a background in physics. So I think it's a good asset to have a diverse team.
How did you came up with the idea? Was it your idea because you spend a lot of time in Africa, or?
So actually, it was David's idea first, and he came up to do this idea during his master's thesis in Berkeley Lab in the US. And he kept working on it. And then when I was in Africa, I discussed with a lot of people about what were their problems. And some people who had solar panels asked me for an alternative to solar panels, because when it's on cloudy days, you couldn't have electricity. And then we discussed with David and started.
Okay. What would you say is your like a long-term goal for your project?
So our long-term goal is to get rid of kerosene lamps as a means of lighting, and to expand the clean energy solutions in developing countries, mainly rural areas in sub-Saharan Africa and also India.
Okay.
And we also really want everybody to have the means to be developed. And to do this, you need light and phones. And in sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of people own a phone, but they cannot charge it at home. So we want to enable them to charge it at home, so they can use it.
Okay. That's a big goal. But that's how goals should be, I think. What's your motivation to participate in the Climate Launchpad program?
So we're always eager to meet other entrepreneurs, people who want to change the world, who have good ideas and who are dynamic. And it's always good to meet these people, to discuss with them and have new ideas for our project too.
So would you say it enriches your process of idea creation?
I think iron sharpens iron, and it's it definitely broadens your horizons to meet people who come up, who tackle other issues that are sometimes they're not related to what we do, but sometimes they can be related to it, and it's great to see how they tackle these issues, because in the end, it's about making things better and easier for people who today live in conditions that are way below what we have now. And I think it's great to be able to exchange ideas with these people.
What's your biggest challenge right now for your project?
Distribution. We want to go to very isolated areas in Africa, because those people who need us live in these areas, and we have to distribute and it's really difficult to go there to start our supply chain. So we're looking for big partners like multinationals who already go there and see if we can stick to their supply chain and do that.
So did you already have someone at hand, a big partner, or are you really focusing on looking for some partners right now?
Some contacts. We have some contacts. Okay. We don't have any deal yet, but we have some contacts.
Okay, so everyone who hears this from the big ones, do it. What's the most surprising situation or outcome you had in these 2 days at the program?
I was actually quite I was actually very interested in seeing how coming from a financial side, I always find it sometimes challenging to know what to present to people in terms of like what do you want to see about our startup that makes a difference in terms of finance. And I found it quite interesting how he came up with a few, like the presenter came up with a few items that were worth mentioning and how to present it. So that was quite a good takeaway.
Was something else for you very surprising?
I was really surprised at the number of people who are selling B2B.
Okay.
I was very focused on B2C. And it's really different point of view and way of tackling the issues. And,
yeah. So there's more B2B than B2C?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Do you have like one takeaway message or one big learning for maybe people who also work on a sustainable or sustainability project?
Takeaway about what?
Like something you learned in the program maybe, or you, from your experience on working on your project, that you can say, okay, you have to do like this or that to really get forward with your project?
There's a lot of people who want to help us. So if you have a good project, a good idea, just go forward and you will meet some people who want to help you. And then you'll be able to do what you want.
Okay.
I'm actually always surprised to see how people are keen on making a difference. And here in Switzerland, we have lots of, I think in many countries there are lots of opportunities, especially for social entrepreneurship. And I think sometimes, as Breck said, you should just go forward and you'll meet someone.
Yeah. And especially tell people what you are up to so they can help you. Because if they don't know, they can't help you. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Bhupinder Buehler. And we wanted to make it possible for people to save their data and have privacy and security about the data, especially for healthcare data. And while we're building our device, we realized there was a huge environmental benefit of reducing the power consumption and the carbon data footprint. And what we're trying to do is help people save a lot of data, but do it with less cost and less environmental impact.
My name's Bijal Joshi and I'm part of Swiss Vault. And what really made us think about our product was more related to how can we be more efficient, not just from a micro perspective, also from a macro perspective, and help organizations as well as perhaps smaller companies store their data efficiently.
What's exactly if you need to narrow it down to like one key feature of your product, what makes it sustainable?
Well, the solutions that are used right now use a lot of power and 18,000 watts of power. And they are also quite heavy for data storage. But what we've done is we've taken out all the superfluous, unnecessary stuff and reduced it down to a very simple device that can store data very efficiently. So it reduces the power consumption down to like 100 watts. So it's a considerable amount of savings in power consumption per so much data that you might need to store.
And also reducing the space you need. Yeah. Okay. How did you come up with the idea?
When we were looking at a solution to save or store human genome data, health data, we were kind of exploring ideas and stuff, and it was just a brainstorming session. And there was an idea about modularity came about, and then we started playing with this idea of modular data storage units that were very lightweight and could be secured anywhere. And that's how it sort of emerged, and we saw benefits after doing all these experiments and testing it in the market and testing with people that we were onto a good idea.
Okay, yeah. Sounds like a very good idea. Because data storage is like so many companies need it. Do you have like, you said medical data? Is there another customer you are focusing on?
Well, I think that data is now quite universal. And in fact, it's the oil that lubricates our economies. And we're really entering into this phase called the data economy, the data-driven economy. So almost everywhere where you are needing data, like smart cities, monitoring traffic flows or self-driving cars, In industry now, they're looking at all the automation processes. So each one is gathering data at various nodes that are very distributed all over the place. And you need to store the data, capture it, and analyze it, and put out a signal. So what our devices are very small. They can fit into any niche sort of environment and conduct these activities, store the data, analyze it, and put out a signal that you need. And that makes it faster, also low cost, and sort of enables all these sort of industries to sort of do it efficiently.
And I think when you really look at the world we're living in, it is becoming modular living, simple, so on. So you have the option of scaling according to your business and what you really need it for, rather than investing in a huge tower, which takes an enormous amount of energy. So I think it provides you with a better option and accessibility in that process.
Okay. What is your long-term goal?
Well, the long-term goal is that we want to help people save all their data and do it forever, and enable every citizen on this planet to control their data. But to do that, I think it's going to take a lot more steps. But we're on the right end of the technology. Technology is getting better because it's getting more smaller, more miniaturized. Things are getting more efficient in terms of analysis. And so I think we're in the right sort of space where in the future, as we're working on this, we'll get improvements that we can deliver to every consumer, as opposed to now we're just targeting businesses.
So our long-term goal as well, it has to be a sort of transactional process. So if we make some money and we would like to grow and improve the modular process, it will change as years go on. So probably our device will even get smaller as we're moving on, and we have to invest in that, on how do we then transfer our current customers maybe into a new device or an improved device. It's a next generation data storage. So if we are able to also build plants around different regions, we open the options for jobs within that community, more access for individuals as well and organizations. But in the end, I think it's more about how are we going to evolutionize and really tackle the data storage question? And what will it look like? Who knows? In the end, you might have a credit card that we might build a credit card version of it that will go in your wallet in case you're lost somewhere, So, I mean, there are so many applications, and data is your biggest asset as a person right now.
What is your motivation for participating in the Climate Launchpad program?
The obvious motivation is, of course, that we want to get support and visibility for our project so that we can develop it further. I think all startups have this sort of valley of death where they enter into, where they're trying to get out of it. And with this coaching and sort of alignment to stakeholders and getting visibility with them, we can sort of solve problems and sort of get into this phase of actually doing more growth.
Mm-hmm. And given our backgrounds, when you're actually involved in a project, in a sort of setting like this, you're able to, we've already constructed it, but now we had to change our thought process and deconstruct what we thought we had created and make positive changes based on feedback and evaluation and some things we didn't even think of at that time. So it's helped.
What is your takeaway message? Maybe not only from the 2 days of the challenge, but from the whole project process you were in. Do you have one thing you would recommend everyone who is starting a sustainable project?
Never stop learning. Every single step that you're going to have, whether you're an expert or not, never stop learning, and never stop learning of other people, because their intake and their comments are probably the most valuable part of what you will hear in any workshop.
So I would agree, and I would add on to that, and that is that reach out to other people for help, and have discussions with lots of people, so that you learn a lot along the way, and of course they can also help you open doors, which will be very critical.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Natalie. I live here in Basel area in Biesfelden. And originally I'm a packaging engineer. So I'm doing packaging development since the last 20 years in industry, but the last 5 years I started studying again environmental management and technology. And so I'm in the meantime more focused on everything what is sustainable, circular economy, and doing more packaging development and projects in this area. Mm-hmm.
And the project you're working on in the Climate Launchpad program is?
It's called Fermentum. And actually the basis is that I realized our statistics are saying that we are throwing away 30% of our organic waste in our own households into the normal bin. And this normal bin is going into incineration and is being burned. As I was doing this myself, I realized, because I don't have a lot of organic waste during the week, how to collect it, where to bring it. So it's quite a hassle here in Basel. So I decided to look for a solution, how to do it.
And you came up with one, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. That's how I came up to Fermentum. Actually, it's not a really new idea, because Japanese people are using it. It's called their bokashi. Mm-hmm. So it's a bin where you put your organic waste into it and put the effective microorganism on it, with a substrate or without a substrate. And then your organic waste starts to ferment. Mm-hmm. And this fermentation process is in one sense cool, because you don't have bad smell which is created. Don't have any flies who are attracting in summertime, and you can store it. Or actually the fermentation process takes some time, about 4 weeks, or between 2 and 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. So you can leave it in your kitchen corner, and it's just stored for a while. The other advantage is that the nutrition of the waste is kept. So when you, in the second process, produce your compost out of it, you have a much higher quality of compost, even though when you would put your waste into your garden, most of the people only throw their waste into the garden and leave it there without doing anything. And the quality of your compost, when you do it like this, is just not good. And it's also, a lot of people don't treat their own home compost. And when it starts rotting, you even create more methane and climatic emissions when you would ferment it.
So the device fits in a kitchen. So how big is it, for example?
I decided about between 10 and 15 liters. Okay. I mean, it really depends, the households, because there are really different households. There are households who are really producing a lot of organic, or eating more vegetable than others. But as I want to concentrate more on the people who don't eat every time at home, who really travel, who really like to have it as a convenient to take it out of the normal bin, because if you have it in your normal bin, it starts also rotting and smelling.
What is your, the long-term goal for your project? So is there something you would wish for?
Well, my long-term goal is actually that all the organic waste which we are producing in the city stays also in the city finally, for urban gardening, for growing our own plants in the city. So that the circle is that we don't need to bring earth or compost in the city but that we have also our added value in what we produce here is created to high value. Compost stays here for again regrowing vegetables or fruits, and it can be also used for local farmers, which are on the borders of the city, who might be also interested to have this high valuable product for their fields.
And I can imagine that also an advantage would be if you are a household with with a lot of organic waste, and you can put that waste out of your bin, you have like cost savings because you don't need that much of the bin bags. You know, that's it's maybe a small saving, but it is one.
Well, I considered the project as cost neutral for the customer, taking into account that you have to bring your normal bag more often outside, even though it's not completely full because it starts really stinking. That's what I need to do sometimes. Then it works, the calculation. Then you would save money, yes. But for my system, for the fermentation process, I mean, you need to invest once into the system, and then normally you need to buy on a regular basis the effective microorganism, because which make the system working.
Okay. So would you also provide the selling of these microorganisms, or?
Yeah. This works with it, because if not, doesn't make sense. Let's say. Yeah.
Okay. So what's your motivation in participating in the Climate Launchpad program?
My motivation is perhaps to be trained also to sell it better, or to be clear how to bring it to the customer as fast as possible, to meet people, potential people I can work with, and to make it known, actually, this product also then in a certain community.
Okay. So it's also the business aspect of the Climate Launchpad.
Of course.
Yeah. What is currently the biggest challenge in your project?
But the biggest challenge is the technical solution.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's not so easy as it sounds. I want to provide a system which is really easy to use for the customer. So I have to put myself into the shoes of the customer, what he can do wrong, let's say, or how can he dispose the organic waste, and what sort of organic waste. What can I ask him to chop it down, or to make little pieces, or yeah. But then also how to bring the organic food into the chamber, which needs to be anaerobic. So without any air. I need to bring the air out. Which works with the bokashi system quite easily, but the bokashi system, so as the Japanese people are using it, is not from a stable process point of view, it's not really working for me. So sometimes it works, sometimes doesn't work. So the challenge is really to create the system which is working, to find the producers, also to produce it in a simple way that it doesn't break after a month working with it. And my approach is also to have an eco design, so to use also material which are sustainable in a certain way, which are okay for me.
Yeah. Do you have like a one takeaway message from the 2 days of the program, or from your time working in the project? One aspect you would really tell everyone who's working in a sustainable project?
It's inspiring, to be honest, to meet so many people who have great ideas. And to see that there's something going on, changing really, and it's worse, even though when you have an idea, to just follow it, and we have so many possibilities in the meantime. Also with this Climate Launchpad to bring our ideas, and even though they are so small, somehow to the market. Yeah. And this is the major learning for me, and then that's what makes me happy, actually.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. These were the Climate Launchpad interviews and some interesting insights on a couple of projects which will enter the finals on the 31st of August this year. I will be a member of the jury, and surely I will inform you about the winner. Now we will hear the roundtable discussion recorded at the 3rd Basel Sustainability Forum, which took place on the 4th of June 2018. The Basel Sustainability Forum is an annual conference covering different sustainability topics year by year. This year's conference presented the current status of research and policy on climate change in Switzerland and beyond, and it addressed some controversial topics, such as the pricing and consumption of fossil fuels affecting pathways towards decarbonization, the right of developing economies to follow their own development path, the competition between economic interests and their social and environmental consequences, and a certain competition between a global climate change agenda and the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. I hope you'll enjoy the discussion. Welcome to everybody from my side, and it's a pleasure to moderate this year's panel discussion. Thanks for having me, and also welcome and thank you to all the panelists. Thanks for accepting the invitation. And I would like you to start with a very brief introduction of yourself and a short insight of what is the most pressing climate change issue in your field. I think we will start right here, if it's okay.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Hügli. I'm responsible for sustainability at the insurer AXA in Winterthur. My team actually covers all aspects of sustainability, meaning the social, the economic, and the ecological aspects of sustainability for the operations here in Switzerland. As Switzerland is a big entity for AXA Group worldwide, we are heavily involved in all the aspects of sustainability at AXA Group level as well. So our voice will be heard, and we're in constant exchange of minds with our colleagues in Paris. Our flagship theme here in Switzerland is climate and energy. That means that we put most of our efforts and energy into this subject, and the reason why is obvious, I guess, for many of us, because climate change will cause damages in the future, and damages will cost a lot of money. And if we have to pay a lot of money, that will harm our business model in the long term. So it's our own interest to really tackle climate change in Switzerland. And as you asked for the most pressing issue regarding climate change, I would say one of the most ones is really to bring climate change on the level of the customer. And that's what we're more and more trying to do, is really to integrate CR-related or climate-related aspects into our products and services. So we kind of make our clients partner of our climate-related efforts. That's what we're trying.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fabian Käser. I'm a networker in the field of medical technology and health technology. And I'm also a coach in the field of business development, business strategy for small and medium-sized enterprises, startups, but also non-profit organizations. So why I'm here, the drivers for me personally are empathy, curiosity, and creativity. And I'm very interested about how we can address the actual problems, climatic problems, but also health-related problems of society with technology which is available today. Another point is also that I think we are very privileged in Switzerland, and we can give something back to society. So We are responsible for the future and for the world which we would like to hand over to our children. So we should do something. We are in the driver's seat today. Personally also, I'm working on projects which are related to healthcare, how we can provide healthcare to people who cannot afford healthcare, how we can cross-finance these healthcare measures to other stakeholders who are available in the system. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Angela. I was invited as a student's representative, and I'm studying the master's program Sustainable Development here at the University of Basel. And let me quickly introduce why I choose this particular master's program. So actually, I was doing economics in my undergraduate, and from the very beginning on, there was this suspicious man called Homo economicus. And I was wondering who this person actually is, because I was looking around and I saw my friends, I saw myself, I saw my family, I saw politicians, and actually nothing really was linked to this Homo economicus. Nobody really acted like one, right? So a Homo economicus is somebody who acts rational, who has perfect information, who is perfectly capable of any information, can deal with it, can take the right decision. And I was wondering, no, this man or woman, it does not exist, right? So I was trying to get to the kind of the more reality and to find more truth about how my personal world and my and your world is actually working, and we as human beings. So I found this very interesting master degree called Sustainable Development, and now I kind of get a clue how models could be more or broader developed, going behind the scene of some rational thinking human being, also tackling some other areas, not only economics, but also natural science and social science. And I'm pretty happy that I have the opportunity to do this and to get a little bit closer to kind of the reality. So my main point about climate change is finding out how this climate change could actually be tackled by human beings.
Thank you. So for me, I've been kind of like wandering between social sciences and natural sciences. And initially I thought, well, okay, I like modeling, so let me do some modeling. But then when I got to the field, after talking with the farmers, then I went back and I asked myself, actually, yeah, that's not really, doesn't really make sense for me now. And so I started moving slowly from, somebody that was more in the area of remote sensing, more towards human geography. And to a certain point, maybe I overdid it. And now I'm trying to get back in the middle to kind of like look at how do both dimensions integrate in social ecological systems research.
My name is Andreas Zivi. I have worked for 30 years in a company which is active in agriculture, which produces, trades, and distributes fertilizers and grains. I'm also responsible for the sustainability efforts of our group. I came here, first of all, as a citizen. I must add, I studied political science, and I probably am more interested in political sustainability than in environmental sustainability. And we might, I think both are intimately linked, and we might have an opportunity to address this point as well. But of course, I came here to learn about sustainability. I learned a lot. I thought it was a very interesting day for me. Now I lost my what I wanted to say. Yeah, what I wanted to say, I'm certainly not here as an expert in climate change. I think when the organizers saw that I represent a company or that I am a member of the business community, they asked me to join the panel simply to have a voice from business. And so I'm here again, not as an expert on climate change.
Thanks. My name is Ed Constable. I think I'm here as a representative of the science and technology community, which on the one hand is demonized for creating the problem, and at the same time demonized for not providing the solutions to the problem. Myself, I've been involved in the interplay of science and society for as long as I can remember, certainly back to the days of Silent Spring and Limits to Growth. My own research area as a chemist and materials scientist is in solar energy and in new lighting technologies. Answering your question as to the most important areas, I think there are two. One is my role within the university, in that we have a duty to ensure that we educate the next generation not to make the mistakes that our generation and the generations before made, that the challenges to be addressed need a paradigm shift in the way of thinking. And secondly, that science and technology can only do what society wants. So we can only really begin to address the problems when the clear targets are identified. And that, I'm afraid, requires political decision.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marco Pifaretti, and I also represent the students. So I study at the moment European Global Studies here in Basel. And, but I also thought maybe I introduce my voluntary engagement, which is at the time engaging for the responsible initiative, responsible business initiative, so-called Konzernverantwortungsinitiative, which may, at least a discussion about it, can be linked quite good to the topic we were talking today, since it's the debate should be how is business involved with international or multinational business? How is it involved in human rights and environmental issues? Furthermore, I'm also doing human rights education in high schools, where we, for example, have one course or have one workshop that is called smartphones. This is also one thing, at least we talked about human rights. We heard about human rights, how it's interlinked, and also how smartphones are interlinked. So that's also an interesting topic I want to show. And I think that's it. Thank you.
So thanks all of you for the very interesting introductions. I would like to proceed with a couple of questions, which are, every single question is directed to all of you. So if you would like to answer a question, just raise your hand or give me a sign and I will pass the microphone to you. So Henry already mentioned other agendas in his presentation. Within the discussion about sustainable development, other agendas, for example, biodiversity, are diverting attention from climate change. Considering that climate change is a part of nearly every sustainable development goal, as we have seen before in the presentations, my question to you is working on several agendas which link to climate change expedient to tackle climate change? Who wants to start? I could also rephrase the question if needed.
Thank you. I think certainly it's important that we are talking about biodiversity. It's important that we are talking about land issues because they are all interrelated. I mean, when we talk about climate, we are actually talking also about terrestrial systems, about land. and what is on the land, and that influences atmospheric circulation and evaporation and so on. So that is why it is important that, for example, the UNCCD, that's the United Nations Convention to combat desertification, that it has its own programs also on land degradation neutrality. And the idea of land degradation neutrality is that each country, of course, voluntarily decides, not to, deforest land or degrade land based compared to the baseline that the country has chosen. So if the country does not deforest land, for example, that also means that we have more trees, and more trees also means, in brackets, probably more biodiversity. So I don't think they contradict one another.
For us as an insurer, I think that the most pressing issue is climate change. So that's why we're really focusing on projects related to climate change. So that's point one for sure. However, as far as companies are concerned, I really think that, first of all, each and every company has to think about its core business. Aspects of core business where it really can make a difference. And then the SDGs come into this discussion. I really like this framework of the Sustainable Development Goals because it's a great communication tool, and it allows really all the companies, to settle down somewhere in one of these 17 aspects of goals, and to really make a link between their core businesses and some of these 17 pressing issues. So in other words, I really think when some companies or people ask me, what can I do? I always say, what is your core business? Where do you invest your money in? And if you find out this one, then you can easily relate it to the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's why I really think they are that important. So again, for insurers, especially for AXA, which is a leading company in climate-related issues, it's really climate change. But we will, of course, tackle the next issues. We're already considering what's next. After we went out of oil, after we went out of tobacco, after we went out of tar sand, we're really looking into next items that might be plastic or biodiversity loss.
I can give a very simple answer. No, it is not expedient. Yes, it is essential. I think that all of the SDGs are interlinked. They all impact on each other, and also they all require local rather than global solutions. And so a diversity of approaches is critical to success.
And maybe just in addition, we are not fighting climate change because we don't want the climate to change, right? Because climate change affects us in several topics. May it be land use, may it be biodiversity and our food system, may it be poverty issues, whatever. So I think all those topics are really closely connected.
Yeah, I think also we should have a holistic agenda. This is very important. And of course, all of these SDG goals are interconnected. We cannot, if you have only one perspective of one SDG goal, maybe then you are not aware about all the other goals we have, right? So for this, I think we should have a holistic agenda so that we can do something which is maybe sustainable for the future and for the world. Maybe then we will have at the disadvantage some goals which are not preferred like others maybe. But we need a agenda which is supportive for a global goal, I think. This is important.
Yes, I agree. And when I heard the question, I thought about a graph which is called the donut, the environmental donut. Maybe you've seen it as well. And there, climate change is only one factor. I think the others, we've also heard land conversion, but also nitrogen and phosphorus loading. And so this is where I would like to ask Andreas Civi what is the agenda within your company?
Before I answer directly your question related to fertilizers, I still believe that the holistic approach must include a political dimension. I ask myself, if we fight or try to curb climate change and try to mitigate the consequences of climate change, and hopefully we will succeed. I'm a little bit more optimistic on the strictly environmental aspects, but I am a little bit pessimistic on the political aspects. What use is it if we all have to live in dictatorships, in fascist dictatorships? And this is not an idle threat. We're seeing it happen all over the place. And there are two reasons why this is not good. First of all, because we want to live in democracies. And secondly, because you cannot fight climate change with populist or, let's say populist, authoritarian, or whatever you call it, politicians. Look what Mr. Trump did with the Paris agreements. So I think we are in a certain danger. Very often I hear people talk only about the environmental aspects. They tend to resign as far as the political aspects are concerned, and I think we need to fight on both fronts. As far as fertilizers are concerned, it's a good question. I don't have an answer. Our industry believes that fertilizers feed half of the world. In other words, you could not feed 7.5 billion people without fertilizers. This being said, the industry is trying to make sure that fertilizers are used in a proper way. There is a standard which is called 4R, right place, right time, right product, and right method, which tries to avoid spillage into the waters of nitrate and phosphates. We're also developing slow-release fertilizers which reduce the percentage which is released into the air. But I would be lying to tell you that fertilizers do not have an environmental impact. And I think it's simply a matter of a conflict. Food security for many continents, for many countries in the world is still of big concern. We in Switzerland, we have the luxury that we don't worry about food security. But I do believe that worldwide we have this conflict. We cannot feed the world without fertilizers, and we do know. So the only choice we have is to try to improve fertilizers, try to improve the use of fertilizers, and reduce as much as we can the environmental impact.
Thank you for your answers to my question. I think you pointed out very clearly that a holistic approach is needed. We heard today a lot about the 2-degree threshold, which is stated in the Paris Agreement. Even if we manage to stay well below this 2-degree threshold, there are already climate change impacts we can see. My question to you is, how can we cope with weather extremes and catastrophes? It's a very general question, but you can stick to your field of profession if you like.
I remember the speech of Ed, and he says that we cannot change physical laws, right? So, but what can we change then? We can change our laws to do something and to change our system. And I think maybe it's not a particular answer. Maybe the professional answer comes from Jinwe. But I think we should work on our systems and to at least try to decrease those hazards as much as possible, and to really enforce people, and having in mind the maybe not rational thinking human being, to also give some guidelines in respect to laws, to have a stricter regulation. Even that, I know that regulatory instruments are not the best solution, maybe because do's and don'ts are not that broadly accepted, or maybe there is a lot of discussion coming up from this, but it's somehow otherwise we maybe are not able to manage that, and we cannot overcome our non-rational thinking in just doing business as usual and having the soft version, right? So if we cannot change the physical laws, we should change our social laws.
Okay. What I would like to say is that we have to, I just want to give you an example. Besides trying to reduce our emissions, just imagine what happened. I think it was last week. We had hailstorms, localized hailstorms in Baden in Switzerland. And those people, they have their insurance. Imagine you have such hailstorm somewhere in Africa or somewhere in India or Bangladesh. Who has an insurance there? Who has social protection there? So I think we have to look at this societal context and look that people have social protection wherever they are, besides reducing emissions, because having such social protection means also buffering you against the laws. You don't have to think about, if you lose all your clothes or all your machines and everything, the insurance will pay. And if the insurance doesn't pay, the community, if you go to the Gemeinde will give you some support. But where else in the world do you get such support? So let me just leave it as a question.
Yeah, we were talking about preventive measures, but we also have to adapt, of course, right? We have to adapt our infrastructure. We have to adapt the business models, how we interact in the future. This is also very important to respond to what happens in the future.
Yeah, I agree. We can't change the laws of physical science. So we will be seeing extremes of climate over the next few years with consequent disasters, even with a 2 degree, even with a 1.5 degree limit. That is the reality. I'm very interested to see how my colleague from AXA is going to respond to this, but I would actually like to broaden the question of social responsibility here, because there's an old-fashioned word which I think has to be taken into the discussion as we respond to these new events, and that's altruism. That we need to respond to demands, to our ability to help societies which are outside our immediate society. So there's very much the Gemeinde-based approach. There's the approach that we have a local support system, but we need to have a more established worldwide system so that when El Nino comes and when we are not affected in Northern Europe, that at the same time we put into place the social responses and the financial responses to ensure that with rapidity the resources are placed where they're needed.
No problem. No. I was actually waiting for this question. No, I mean, as an insurer, I mean, you have different ways to really help. I mean, first of all, prevention. I mean, as it was mentioned, we put a lot of money into prevention issues as well. I mean, again, it's in our own interest, I mean, to prevent damages and at the same time protect people over the long term. So So again, prevention is one point. Then, of course, insurers have lots of big data effectives, So we are really risk managers. We know where damages occur. We know we have data going back to, 30, 40, 50 years. So we really know how climate changes, what it could happen or what it could mean to actually, for instance, coastal regions, where most of people live, more and more people live, and what it could mean regarding damages. So, this is another way how insurers could actually help support people in the long run. So again, as risk managers, of course, providing data, giving data back to society. That's what we are already doing. And of course, prevention measures, and then, of course, responsible investments. It was mentioned, I think, this morning as well. So the way we invest our money, actually it's your money, that's really gonna make an impact, And again, as AXA, I can really say that in the insurance world, we're actually leading the way here. We're demonstrating leadership. Again, we not only went out of coal, we, for instance, don't underwrite, we don't insure these industries anymore. And right now we are the only one that is doing this. So again, not only not invest in these industries, but we don't insure them anymore. So this is really a twofold approach to these industries.
Maybe as an addition to my first question, you already said that there needs to be like a better infrastructure to prevent upcoming events, or there need to be investments. But who really is in charge, in your view, to prepare for upcoming events? Is this the investors? Are these the politicians? What's your opinion on that?
It's different people. As an individual, within my capabilities. So within the capabilities I have, that means within the choices that I can make. And then I can make choices, and these choices depends on the environment, the socio-political environment within which I am in, whether that environment allows me to make choices or not. And then, of course, it depends on the various social groups. So I think it's every social entity from the individual upwards.
Yeah, I agree fully with this. And what I would like to add is the following. I missed the point, sorry. No, what we should do is also we should empower the local communities that they are able to prepare about the future incidents that will happen, right? So altruism, of course, is important, but we should also empower the local communities, and everyone is at the end responsible. Also the governments, the private sector. That's important.
I think we are all in charge. We are in charge as individuals, but we as a company and the government as well. And I discussed it very briefly this afternoon with Andreas. A few years ago, companies were considered as thinking short term, and politicians and politics were considered as thinking long term. Well, I have to say more and more it's the other way around. Corporations are thinking long term. I can tell you that our horizon goes up to at least 2030. What about politics? There's a 4-year turn they're thinking about. So in other words, corporations are really leading the discussion here. Look at the US, it's the same there. Whatever Trump and the government is doing, I mean, big companies don't really care. They just go for climate-related issues. Cities, other companies are really leading the discussion here. So again, companies, private sector is really taking up this challenge here. And really, politics have to step up as well. So it's up to us again. I mean, we have to vote for the right people in parliament. And look at the situation in Switzerland. Look at the last elections. Look at the last votes in Switzerland. I mean, look at the race of the Green Party. Look at the Green Liberals. They're gaining momentum. Look at the last few votes. Look at the Zweitwohnungsinitiative. Look at the Kulturlandinitiative. So Swiss people, they really care about the climate. What about the parliament? Look at the majority in Swiss parliament. It was said this morning, most of them are right from the middle. So there is more and more kind of disconnect between the politicians and really their base, you know, the voters. So really voters again have to stand up and select the right people for parliament.
I think I just want to add something to your saying that business is actually caring because they have to, because they think long term, and I agree, most of them. But then again, there is this this view on what kind of business model are you actually doing? Is the core of your business model actually a sustainable one, or are you taking the fuel out of the ground? So what I suggest, what we do is really look at business models, not only like the greenwashing prospectus, but the idea, the values that are behind business actions, and there we have to be critical, I guess, because I'm sure that within the SDGs, a lot can be switched towards something that is sustainable, because most of the businesses are in their core they have a sustainable view, but some of them just, in my opinion, when I look at the business model, it's not going to work in a sustainable way, and there I think politics have to, or people have to intervene. And yes, I'm very glad that everybody said that, yes, we are all responsible, because I think we really are. And also everybody here in the room is as responsible as any other. It's not that we can pass the ball only to politics, because we are everywhere. We are politics. Like me, for example, I am, as a consumer, I'm involved in business. As a voter, I'm involved in politics. I'm involved in NGOs who advise politics and business, and I'm at the university who also advises business and politics. And then there are supra groups, which we are also part of. They're a bit further away, but we're part of it. Yeah. And there are also interest groups, as we heard this morning as well, where we have to be critical if these interest groups are representing our interests or just the interests of a few.
Does someone like to add? We will come back to the corporation view in a moment, so we might leave it like this and come back to it later, if it's okay. I would open another discussion or another theme for discussion. In one way or another, we already referenced to the necessity of social transformation. According to the UN Secretary Antonio Guterres, social transformation is needed because climate change is an existential threat for most life on the planet, including and especially the life of humankind. Focusing for now on the individual perspective, how can our achieved lifestyles be changed, and in which way do they need to be changed at all?
I'll step into the lion's den, and I will step in a provocative manner. We need to consider every action that we as individuals take, from the most trivial level, whether you actually take that paper cup and fill it with coffee from the Nespresso machine and then throw the cup away, through to fulfilling your role as a political animal in ensuring that you develop a government system that represents your needs and that can respond to the new challenges. And before we come to the corporate issues, I think I want to go back to where I said the education, that I firmly believe the reality is that the society in which our next generation and the generation after will live will not be recognizable to those who grew up in the last 10 to 20 years. I think the external demands and the external criteria placed by climate change means that we will be operating in a very, very different environment. It will be an environment, I believe, in which the expectations of an improvement in lifestyle cannot be maintained. And I think that's provocative enough to throw to the rest of the panel.
To this, I only have the question again, what about the political sustainability? The perspective of many people in the last 10 years seems to have changed inasmuch as for the first time in the last 50 years, they don't see the future as being more brilliant than the past. And look at the political reactions which this triggered. Look at the rise of politically not correct parties. And I'm just most afraid that if we do not find a better way to reduce our ecological footprint without sacrificing too much of our comfort, I'm afraid of the political consequences.
Maybe to add from the student's perspective, who tries the best to do something good for this world, because it's actually our world, right? I can just share with you what helps me to improve my individual lifestyle. It is starting with things which are kind of easy for me, which I know I can do, and to make them to routines. Because routines help you to just stick to a pattern, which should, of course, be good or sustainable in some way, right? So if you just think of your daily routines and just get 1 or 2 or afterwards 3 steps in those routines and try to improve them, you will be much better in the end than just trying to make the world and your whole lifestyle better from one to the other day. And what helps also is to commit yourself to what you are doing, and also to share it with other people. Because in the way, for example, that I'm saying, okay, I'm a student of sustainability, my peer group knows, okay, if she's now coming with, I don't know, plastic bags, and eating meat and consuming this and that, they would wonder, wait a minute, you study sustainable development, are you? And this also gives a feedback effect to my personal view and to my commitment. So it really helps to tell other people what you want to do, to make people remind you what you want to do, and to commit somehow to yourself, and to make good things routines.
I think it's very, very important that people realize that sustainability is really fun. It's fancy. It's really great to work in sustainability and to live sustainably. It's really big fun. And therefore, as a corporation, for instance, but also as a politician, you have to reward people and not to punish people. I think this is really important. That means if someone follows a certain lifestyle, you get rewarded for it. If you use less energy, if you have a low carbon intensified car, if you do other stuff that has a low impact on climate change, you should get rewarded, and then it's fun to do it. The same thing I already mentioned for corporations. As I said, we try to include CR-related aspects into our products and services. That means many people would like to do something for the environment or for the society. But we as a corporation, but also as politicians, we have to make it as easy as possible. So for instance, when we sell our products or services, we combine it with a way people can contribute to an environmental challenge, for instance. And by doing that, by buying this product or this service, at the same time, they do something for the environment. And I tell you, it has really a huge impact. Let me give you an example. In Switzerland alone, we have 2 million customers. Worldwide, we have 110 million customers, excuse me. And, well, maybe in the future. Yeah. So, what I want to say is, so, a positive aspect multiplied by 2 million, multiplied by 110 million makes really an impact. And that's why it's really important to make it as fancy, as easy as possible to contribute for customers. And again, reward them, not punish them.
Thank you very much. Coming back to or extending the corporation view, how can economic growth be sustained with, as you, Marco, mentioned, multiple different business models? Do you think image-related sanctions, for example, so that every corporation needs to have a sustainability report, for example, in the future, do you think image can tackle the problem, or should it be more than that?
Jochen Zeitz, the former CEO of Puma, once said, "What is good for the planet is good for the business." So I'm sure there are lots of business opportunities for clever corporations. And regarding business models, what we should do, I'm sure that we should include short-term and long-term targets into corporation goals. I think this is an important aspect. And by doing so, over time, you decouple growth from your own CO2 footprint. So again, include short-term and long-term goals into your strategy, into your long-term strategy. And therefore, by growing so, at the same time, you decouple from, or you decarbonize your business. I'm quite sure this is something that happens. And very important as well, you choose long-term investors that actually support your business model. You support your strategy. This is important. And very famous example is Unilever, for instance. So when Paul Polman, the current CEO, started his business with Unilever, the first thing he did, he stopped publishing half-year reports, quarterly reports. He said, "I'm not interested in quarterly reports anymore. I do a yearly report, that must be enough. And if I have investors, they think it's not enough, then actually I'm not waiting for you guys. Of course, I guess you can do so or say so if you have success. But Polman, as CEO of Unilever, proved that having a sustainable agenda over time pays off. Look at the stock price. Look at the revenues they have. I mean, they have both. They really have profits, and they're really a company considered as leading the discussion in sustainability.
Sorry. I just want to raise an issue. I think maybe then the question is, what happens when there is no profit to make and one still needs to be sustainable?
As a matter of fact, you mentioned it in your presentation before, that there is a bottom-up and a top-down action, and both must take place concurrently. And I agree, I think it needs both. I think image or investors' preferences for sustainable investments, they certainly are a pressure point to make companies behave in a more sustainable fashion. However, I do believe it also takes legal and policy interventions, laws which have to be followed to improve things.
Thank you. Now I would like to connect both perspectives with you. So, no matter if it's an individual perspective or if it's a corporational perspective, there always remains this not my problem. So, Angela, you mentioned the peer pressure thing. So we are all here in the room, I suggest, interested in sustainable development. So we're actually talking to the wrong people, right? We should talk to people who are skeptics. We should talk to people who don't even know about sustainable development. I mean, they are out there. So how would you think we can tackle the problem of people thinking, that's not my problem, it doesn't affect me?
Well, I think as everybody of us has different motivation patterns or different views on what is valuable for me or for you or for anybody, and this also connects to political views or to education, etc. I think framing is a key word for me in this debate, because I can frame, for example, climate change issues in economic ways. I can frame it in traditional ways. For example, if I tell a very right-wing Swiss citizen, okay, look what happens to the biggest glaciers as a Swiss symbol of your proud whatever, then maybe it matters somehow. But if you just say, oh, come on, we have to be responsible for other people abroad, living in Africa, wherever, in a totally another world, kind of, this maybe would not motivate people to do something. So I think framing for different people in different areas, in different contexts, might help to make an issue out of it for everybody. And I think everybody has some kind of motivation or some kind of value set, and I think we have to come up with smart solutions to frame it in the best way to tackle specific people and their motivation.
Yeah, we heard about incentives, gamification and rewards. This is one aspect, but I think also we need a framework with regulatories and with policies which will control us in the future, how we spend energy, how we consume food, how we consume meat, and so on.
Of course, there's no answer to the question, but whether it's at the individual level, whether it's at a corporate level, or whether it's at the level of the body politic. To use a much overused word, there needs to be a sense of ownership, a sense that at all levels that one has a responsibility and that one is responsible to ensure that the worst effects of climate change are mitigated. And now the realism comes in, of course, that you can only achieve that sense of ownership by appealing to the sense of selfishness. So exactly as was said, you have to apply a sense of ownership that is unique to each different individual, each different body, each different part of the world, that they each see the benefits for themselves, which lead to this sense of altruism. And I also agree with the regulation, uncharacteristically, that the regulatory framework has to be set up, coming back to what was said earlier, to reward those that work in this way and not to punish those that don't. So a regulatory framework that is set up in a system of rewards is also a way to enable this change.
Yeah, I also agree that I just want to break it down to the individual level again. So we were also talking about the paradigm change, and I'm absolutely sure that if we all individually, and there comes in that it's I think it's fancy, and I think it's sexy, but also we have to, in a way, live it and feel what we think is good about whatever sustainability is, and then we can actually from bottom up probably reach a paradigm shift. This is going to take a long time, but the faster we do it in our own heads, the faster it will go.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's also about values, understanding the values that the different peoples or individuals hold, because depending on the values, then maybe that could be a way to engage with the one or the other person. And then related to the issue of values is also the issue of recognition and solidarity, because recognition means that we are respecting the other person, that is the other person standing in front of us, and by respecting the other person, we are recognizing that this person might have a different view or a different value than we do, and then having tolerance to accept or discuss these values with the person, and then see how to engage with that person.
Another aspect is also efficiency. We have to become more efficient. If we burn 6 liter fuel per 100 kilometers, that's too much. We move 2 tons for one individual. So there are plenty of aspects where we can become more efficient. And this is also something we can cope with technology, right? So here we have also to improve and to bring up solutions.
You just reminded me about the issue of intellectual property rights, because when it comes down to hard negotiations, then it's the issue of intellectual property rights. Who owns the technology? Who owns the knowledge? So like you were saying that, we have to improve efficiency. But if improving efficiency means that you have to, tell me your secrets about your technology that you have developed over 15 years, then that means then we have to come down to the issues of values and solidarities and see whether there is any way that we can, kind of like negotiate, because that is often one argument that is brought up when one talks about technology transfer. Because even if one is no longer using, one is using energy efficiency cars here in Switzerland, in many other places in the world, people are using machines that are gulping lots of petrol and lots of energy, and they don't have access to this new technology. So that's a real issue, I think.
I might like to add something to the value point you said before, and it made me think about the institution I'm in, and I'm doing a very nice interdisciplinary course. And within this value discussion, I thought about maybe there is a division starting from technological and natural science, and on the other hand, philosophy and humanities, social science, and they are going in some kind. I think they are going in different directions, and the value part you said in this whole discussion about technology and economy, of course, also needs on a big scale, on a global scale. We need also to think about our values, our global values, and link them together with all the sciences. So, as a representative of the university, what would you think about it? Are you?
I would agree. Absolutely. And strangely enough, I've just been making a checklist here, in that ultimately actions will be at the individual level, they will be regulated by politics, they will be enabled by corporate actions. But I just took this meeting today as an example to have a little look at what we've done right and what we've done wrong. Because correctly, this audience has an interest in sustainability and the impact of climate change. And I've got a couple of plus points. There are glass bottles here which are going to be recycled. I've got a plus point that we're bringing stakeholders from different communities together for a dialogue. Unfortunately, I have some negative points which we could have thought about and which are actions at the individual level which would enable change. I can see some plastic cups on the surface here. I think they're PET. They can be recycled to a certain extent. We've already talked about Nespresso and paper cups. Plastic for the labels. These are recyclable, but do we need them? I think the air conditioning is still on in this room. That's in the university. Do we need the air conditioning still on? These are paper pads, and some of us are writing on them. I'm certain this is chlorinated paper. So this paper has had a significant impact on the environment before it's sitting in front of us, waiting to be written upon. Do we even need a physical meeting? And this is actually answering your question, that many physical meetings and conferences can be replaced by online meetings and virtual meetings. This has been actively discussed within the university environment. There are arguments for it and against it, but we certainly need to progress that dialogue. If that was an answer to your question.
I don't think so.
Someone else? Any other suggestions?
Yes, thanks for the input. Just a comment which comes into my mind. Yes, I think we have a lot of things we can improve, but otherwise, I think one big plus point you did not mention is that we share our thoughts, that we are getting motivated, that we learn a lot actually. So many highly sophisticated scientists are among us. We have the opportunity to really squeeze out this information, to share it, to go home, to tell our neighbors, to tell our families what we heard about, and to be motivated to go on with our work, right? And I think this is something which should also be counted. You cannot count it in amounts of plastic cups and Nespresso cups, but you can somehow to get the price on this value as well.
Thank you very much. I joined this one very, very much. I think staying motivated for all of us is pretty important to proceed and work on. We are slightly running out of time, so I have one last question to please Henry, because I would really like to discuss the question of decarbonization. So, due to the availability of fossil fuel, as Henry pointed out, how can decarbonization be achieved without peak oil and with no quantified decarbonization goals in the Paris Agreement? A big one for the end. Sorry. Is there a way to decarbonize without peak oil and without quantified measures?
We spoke about the responsibility of each of us, of corporations and the governance, but I think there is one stakeholder group missing. I think to really maybe reach the goal you mentioned, we really have to look at the top emitters. You know, the top emitters, maybe the top 10 corporation states, whatever. That are actually responsible for, I don't know, 90% of the CO2 emissions. And the reason why we should more focus on the top emitters and take them into more responsibility, the reason why they have most to lose, actually. They're the top emitters, but they have a really a reason why they should really engage much more. They have most to lose. These companies or these individuals or even these states. And that's why kind of we should try to find a way to engage them much more in the debate than right now. So the top emitters for me, this is clearly a stakeholder group that has not too much pressure right now. And another possibility may be to get closer to the goal of decarbonization. Zero CO2 neutrality. I mean, compensation of the CO2 emissions of corporations. I know that many NGOs think that when a corporation says, I want to become CO2 neutral, they think it's not really a good deal because they just pay for their CO2 emissions to get a clean sheet in a way, you know. But on the other side, you have to think about it twice maybe, because when they actually pay a lot of money for their compensation, if you actually invest this money you get in other projects, these projects could have twofold or threefold or manifold benefit to regarding climate change. So, for instance, with this compensation money, you plant new trees, new forests. At the same time, these new forests actually are good for the soil. At the same time, they're good for the biodiversity. At the same time, maybe local people can profit for tourism reasons. So, but what's happening right now when companies declare to become CO2 neutral, they're punished from pressure groups. They're punished from NGOs for doing so. I'm not sure this is really the right aspect. This is really the right way to do.
I would like to point out a couple of additional conflicts, and maybe we also have to choose what is really most important to us. We're talking about decarbonization. You were talking at the same time about denuclearization. Nuclear power stations would be, theoretically at least, one possible solution to decarbonization. So if we forbid nuclear power station, and if we, which I very well understand, but if we also forbid research on nuclear power stations, there might be a knock-on effect on decarbonization. Another example from my industry is genetically modified organisms. You know that in Switzerland they are forbidden. You know that in other countries they are forbidden as well. I wouldn't be amazed if the majority of the public today here in this room is against genetically modified organisms. But of course, genetically modified organisms could contribute to greatly reduce the ecological footprint of world agriculture. So maybe we also have to review our choices and set our priorities.
I was just thinking about your comment about the top emitters, right? You said that we should tackle them more because they have a lot more to lose. And I think that's totally right. I agree with that. But I think if I remember correctly, we saw that Switzerland, if we combine all the emissions, we are among the 6 biggest emitters. So your top 10 that you mentioned is actually like right here. Yeah. So, yeah. And this is, I think, and then that's this big question, you know, I mean, this question, we should have an answer to that because we are one of the biggest emitters and we have the resources to kind of, or the capacities to come up with good solutions. But at some point we are not. And this is why I'm always wondering also, with my, colleagues from the studies, we are at some point pretty much motivated to work on it because we see there are so many solutions, but on the other hand, nothing really happens, nothing really big happens, right? And I think the thing is that we are not going out of our comfort zone somehow because, yeah, we kind of try to do our best, but actually it doesn't really work. And I have a big question mark why it doesn't work. So to not lose track and to lose all the motivation, then I'm always trying to, okay, stay focused. Maybe what is your impetus you have, like your biggest impetus you can do? What can you do best actually? And then consequently stick to that. Because we cannot, like, in each person is taught to be like, you should be responsible about everything. But no, we have to try and be responsible about 1 or 2 certain things, but stay consequent with that and try to come up with those solutions in the end together. So this is just my state of mind.
Thank you. I think I cannot leave that with the GMO without saying anything about it. I mean, it's the science behind it. I'm a novice, you know, when it comes to the science behind it. But then when you think about the ethical issues behind it, I mean, we are talking about, you know, products where farmers who are poor don't have the money to purchase seeds, and then they are forced to purchase seeds when they don't have money to purchase seeds. So how will that look for their food security? And what does that mean if every season they have to purchase seeds because they're dependent on the industry that is producing those seeds? That is one aspect which I think, you know, not talking about the biotechnological importance of GMO, but about the ethical issues. Access to seeds is very critical for a farmer. Access to inputs is very critical for a farmer. So in that sense, I think this aspect should also be discussed and not just the technology. And the other question is, you know, many countries are watching what is going on in Europe. And so if Europe does not accept GMO, why should a small African country that does not have the technology or the resources or the infrastructure accept GMO? And then the other issue is that if we are saying, like I said, I don't understand the biotechnology behind it and all that. But then if we are saying that we have 30% harvest losses, you know, we have low-hanging fruits. Why don't we, first of all, you know, pluck the low-hanging fruits of reducing our harvest losses especially in those contests, than going, for, climbing to get that particular fruit that is hanging very near the edge of the cliff. If you understand my metaphor, but I just want to state clear, I don't understand the biotechnology. I'm not against research on, biotechnology or GMO, but think about the ethical issues around it. Who has access to the resources? And what about other ways of addressing food insecurity?
Thank you very much.
We are now at the end of this month's episode, and I hope you enjoyed listening to the diverse inputs. If you would like to know more about the topic of climate change, check out my blog article, The Big Picture Climate Change. I will grant myself a short summer vacation, so you will hear the next episode of KimiB.Good in August. Until then, I wish you all the best and keep spreading good news. KimiB.Good is supported by Boost, a program of University of Basel, and I would like to say a big thank you to all of the members of the Boost program.